All right, so good afternoon, everyone, and I'm really excited. Good afternoon, colleagues. Good afternoon, friends. It is my pleasure to invite you to today's interactive workshop, Teaching with UDL. It's a workshop for higher education faculty, and it's hosted by the Center for Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning in partnership with our esteemed colleagues at Humber Polytechnic. We are especially delighted to have faculty joining us from our cross-campus colleagues. And so for what is going to be a rich, collaborative, and transformative learning experience. Let me acknowledge the presence of my colleagues from, seeing some of my colleagues from UWI St. Augustine, Dr. Jones, who is our faculty development specialist, Mr. Javed Mohammed, Mr. Randy Duku, Ms. Shala Phillips, Ms. Aisha Moore. So thank you for joining us. But I also want to also put on the record and acknowledge my colleagues from UWI Settle Cave Hill. I note that Dr. Justin Zephyrin, Director for Settle, is in the room. Welcome. Mr. Troy Carrington is there. I'm seeing Mr. Troy Carrington. Also, Dr. Andrea Marshall, welcome. And I know that we have colleagues from UTT, from COSTAD, from UWI Roytech, from UWI Arthur Lockjack, and persons from USC. So certainly, thank you for joining in this session. This workshop is not just another professional development session. It is a response to a powerful call from our students. Oh, yes, our students. In the 2023-24 Intercampus Guild Council report, they presented a compelling case and request for enhancing tertiary education through integration of UDL principles. And so our students have challenged us to rethink how we teach, to embed universal design for learning principles into a curriculum, and to draw inspiration from global best practices, which in the Caribbean, make it our way. And so it is clear that inclusive education is not optional, it is essential. It is essential. And so as we embark upon this journey together, we do so with understanding that UDL is not just a passing trend, it is a fundamental shift in how we design learning, one that embraces learner variability, removes barriers, and fosters equitable access for all. In fact, I would like to stay a plug here because we do have, if you've not registered as yet, I'll put a plug in here for our premium lecture, which is on the Friday, the 26th of September, in-person event. I'll put a plug in, we'll put the link in the chat, but certainly we want to invite you to that as well because it's going to be a premium lecture by Dr. Tom Tobin. And so we're really happy, really excited by today's session. And I want to say a special thank you because this started through a partnership with a discussion I had with Rania, who is the Deputy Associate Dean of Teaching and Learning at Humber Polytechnic, whose leadership has really helped advance so many different initiatives. And so I want to introduce the persons who will be quite quickly, they're going to introduce themselves further a little bit, but I want to introduce the facilitators, and we could not have done this without our esteemed colleagues from Humber Polytechnic, and they're all on, and you will see them in a while, and Professor Mackenzie Kitchell, he's a passionate educator, advocate for equity in learning, moving, transforming theory to practice. We had the honor of having Mackenzie and Tamara with our leading with UDL, and we also have the introducing UDL. And we also have with us Tamara Ba, who is an experienced educational developer who brings a wealth of knowledge in curriculum design and inclusive teaching practices. And we have Sarah Mazuri, correct pronunciation. And Sarah is a planetary scientist, a communicator, an educator. You should check her TED Talk on TED Talk. It's really inspiring. And today they're going to join helping us to reflect and reimagine our teaching practices through the lens of universal design for learning. We will be monitoring the chat, so do keep your chat going. Let's make the most of this opportunity. And I know that we will be issuing a certificate of participation for those of you who would have participated and be here for at least 80% of the time. All right? And we will be sharing insights. So we really want you to collaborate. And I don't want to take much time. I just want to say thank you for being here, and let's dive in. Let's dive in. So I want to turn over now to Mackenzie. Mackenzie, I'm turning over to you. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Hill, for that wonderful introduction. Just to confirm, everyone can see the slides that I've just shared on the screen. Yes, I see some nods. Wonderful. Thank you very much. Excellent. So again, welcome. Thank you for joining us for this workshop, Teaching with Universal Design for Learning, a workshop for higher education faculty. So just to start, an accessibility statement. I'm going to post in a moment a copy of the slides in the chat for you so that you have access to them. You can adapt them as you need if you need to resize or use screen reader or whatever you need to use. So they're there. We have used the Microsoft PowerPoint Accessibility Checker to ensure that the slide deck is accessible. As I said, I'll provide a copy of those slides in a moment in the chat. If you do have any questions or concerns or any feedback for us, please do feel free to contact one of the facilitators, reach out to us in the chat, or you can send us a private message through the chat. Just a reminder, I believe that we have enabled closed captioning for this session as well. So just some brief introductions. Dr. Hill kind of gave us a cursory introduction, but maybe we'll just take a moment now to just tell you a little bit more about who we are and what we do. So Sarah, you're the first picture on the screen, so I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Mackenzie. Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Mazri. I'm an educational developer with teaching excellence at Innovative Learning at Humber Polytechnic. My background is in planetary science, but I've been working in higher ed and pedagogy for the last decade or so. I'm really glad to be here and looking forward to learning together today.
Hi, everybody. My name is Tamara Barr. I'm colleagues of Mackenzie and Sarah, educational developer with the Teaching Excellence team at Humber, and I'm really happy to be here to share some insights into UDL and course design.
Excellent. Thank you, Tamara. And so I'm Mackenzie Ketchell. I'm a teaching faculty at Humber Polytechnic, but I'm also presently a project secondee with our Innovative Learning Department as well, where I work with my colleagues, Sarah, Tamara, and many others in work around faculty development, specifically related to universal design for learning. My background is, I'm a behavior analyst by training, and I've done a number of years of clinical work with adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So I'm very passionate about equity and access. So just a quick agenda for us today, kind of what we'll be covering as we move through the workshop. So we'll start off, I'll give you Dr. Hill already gave a bit of a brief overview, kind of how this partnership has evolved and kind of where we're at. So I'll talk a little bit about that, what we've done so far. And I'm going to give you an introduction or a reintroduction to UDL. I'm just going to kind of hit the highlights of those main points. We're hoping that most of you were able to attend one of the previous sessions that we did, or to view the videos of those sessions. So I'll just kind of hit those highlights as a bit of a refresher for you to kind of connect you to that prior learning. And then we will jump into the workshop where we're going to make this as interactive as possible to help walk you through this idea of integrating UDL into your course design. So we'll talk about learning outcomes, selecting assessments, and then planning learning activities. So our goals or learning outcomes for today is hopefully by the end of this session, you'll be able to explain the rationale, goals, and principles of the UDL framework and how they support learner access and engagement. You'll be able to apply the UDL framework in a combination with constructive alignment and backwards course design to develop clear and inclusive learning goals. You'll analyze how UDL principles inform the design of assessments that offer choice and flexibility for diverse learners. And then we'll talk about designing learning activities. So you'll be able to design learning activities that provide multiple means of engagement, representation, and expression in a variety of teaching and learning contexts. So that's our goals that we're hoping that you leave here with today. So just to kind of go back and kind of pick up where Dr. Hill left off in terms of this partnership and this kind of relationship between Humber and UE. So in, I believe it would have been May of 2024, Rania, who Dr. Hill previously mentioned, who is our Associate Dean, Rania Khan, Rania, myself, and one of our other colleagues, Kate Stagg, did a presentation at STELI, the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning in Higher Education Conference in Niagara Falls, Ontario, Canada, in May of 2024. And Dr. Hill attended that session, hearing kind of about some of the work that we had been doing as an institution in our journey in UDL. And through that session, after that session, we were able to connect, and Dr. Hill and Rania made a connection, and we talked about how we could kind of share our journey and what we've been doing with UDL, and help support this great initiative that we hear you're embarking on as well at UE. So in February of 2025, we had a webinar, Introduction to Universal Design for Learning, that was very well attended by many of your colleagues and yourselves probably at UE. In June of 2025, as Dr. Hill mentioned, we had another webinar called Leading with UDL, a workshop for academic leaders, where we had a number of leaders from your institutions join us to talk about this. We also had the pleasure in June of welcoming one of your colleagues, Javed Mohammed, to Toronto to spend some time with us at Humber Polytechnic. And we were able to, Javed was able to come and join us in a presentation. Every year at Humber, we have what's called Humber Showcase, where we highlight and showcase all of the great work that's being done throughout our institution. And Javed was able to join us and join us for that presentation and share a little bit about what UE's journey with UDL and kind of how we've collaborated and worked together, which brings us to today, here in August of 2025, and our session and our workshop today on teaching with UDL. And you can see I've kind of left some question marks there because we've had lots of conversations, and we're looking forward to continuing this relationship and finding other ways that we can work and collaborate. We may be in different parts of the world, but I think we all have this shared vision and goals for what post-secondary education and learning can be. So we hope to continue this relationship and find many great ways to kind of collaborate moving forward. So as I said, I'll just do a real quick reintroduction to UDL, just kind of hit some of those key concepts and ideas. The first is this idea of learner variability. We recognize that each one of our learners come to us in our learning environments and experiences with a wide range of diverse identities, experiences, and individual needs. And we recognize that when the kind of, I'll do air quotes, kind of more traditional one-size-fits-all approach of post-secondary education that many of us may have been familiar with from the past, where there's limited options and limited choice. When that's the approach, many learners get left behind because of those individual differences, preferences, and needs. And so these factors, things like previous experience, identity, all of these things can, when they come into combination with these learning environments, can actually lead to potential barriers. So many of these aspects of an individual's identity, their experience, can actually prevent them or cause challenges for them in terms of being able to access and engage fully with the learning experiences that we're creating and providing for these students. So the goal in UDL is to think about how do we proactively predict what some of these barriers may be, and then design our curriculum with flexibility and choice to help to kind of avoid or eliminate some of these barriers from the beginning before we even get started. And there's three main principles of UDL that kind of overarch this framework and the work that we do. And these are designing for multiple means of engagement, so providing choice and flexibility and option in how learners engage with or choose kind of those learning experiences that are meaningful to them. How do we connect individuals' identities, experiences, previous knowledge, interests into our learning experiences so that we can really kind of capture and engage those and motivate those learners. The next principle is designing for multiple means of representation. And this is often kind of the starting point for many people when they start with UDL. It's sometimes kind of the easiest start to do, but it's also the one that really kind of is the most accessible for many people. So multiple means of representation is providing choice and flexibility in how learners access content. So again, thinking back to that traditional kind of one-size-fits-all approach, when I think back to my post-secondary learning experience, I often remember my courses where it was a lecture, a textbook chapter, and a multiple choice exam. And that was kind of the one size fits all. If that didn't work for you, if lectures were something that was not your preference in terms of learning, you could read the textbook. If reading the textbook didn't work for you, then you were kind of left out. So multiple means of representation is providing flexibility, choice, option, and variety in how we present content. So students can kind of are able to kind of take some control over that themselves. And then the final principle is designing for multiple means of action and expression. And this principle, again, looks at how do we provide choice and flexibility in how our students and learners demonstrate the knowledge and skills and values that we are teaching them or hoping that they will develop. And so we do this again by providing that flexibility. Instead of just having a multiple choice quiz, we could have a presentation. Someone could make a video. They could design a visual representation of their learning. So providing lots of choice and flexibility that meets individual needs, but also preferences as well. And then the final concept that I'll talk about is just kind of the overarching goal of universal design for learning. And this is supporting learners to develop learner agency. So learners develop an understanding of how they learn and are able to kind of empower themselves to make choices that are beneficial to their learning experience. And so ultimately, that's our goal. We want to support our learners by providing them access to the learning environment, really kind of capturing and engaging them, giving them some choice in how they navigate through that content, and then allowing them to demonstrate back to us, yes, I've met this learning outcome. I have developed this skill. I understand this concept. So that's kind of the reintroduction to the overarching concept of and framework of UDL. And so now on the screen, I'm showing you the CAST UDL guidelines. So CAST is the Center for Specialized Technology. And they are the group that kind of has developed and are overseeing the iterations of these guidelines. And so if you're new to UDL, this may seem a little bit overwhelming, but it shows kind of all of these different principles and the different guidelines and strategies that you can use. In a couple slides, you're going to see some links and some QR codes where you're able to access these online. Sorry, if I can just check with Sarah and Tamara, were either of you able to put the slides in the chat? If not, I will do that right now real quick. All right. So if you just give me one moment. My apologies. I just have to quickly close it so that I can post it in the chat. There we are. So they should be arriving now. We'll just reopen the slides. And we are back. All right. If you can just confirm you can see those slides on the screen now. Not yet.
Not yet.
How's that?
Yeah.
Yes, now.
Excellent. There we go. Sorry about that. Okay. So I'll just quickly catch up again. There we go. So this is the UDL, the CAST UDL guidelines, or graphic organizer as it's referred to. And it's a great tool. As we go through today's session, we're going to do some breakout groups. You're encouraged to maybe open these up in a different window so that you can refer to them as we go. And I'm going to show you the links to that in just a moment. Oh, Sarah's posted them in the chat. Thank you, Sarah. And so ultimately, this is kind of UDL in action, the image that you can see on the screen here. So on the left-hand side of the screen, there's a tree, and there's 3 individuals, each standing on a box or a crate of equal height. And what you'll see is the individuals are also of differing heights. And so the individual on the left standing on that crate is able to reach the apple on the tree. The next individual is somewhat shorter and is unable to reach the tree. The third individual also is shorter and is unable to reach the apple from the tree. This is equality. This is providing everybody one size fits all in terms of approaches and resources. On the right-hand side of the picture, you'll see the same tree, the same 3 individuals, but each of those individuals has different resources that are beneficial to them. The first individual has 1 crate, the second individual has 2 crates, the third individual has 3 crates. This allows each of those individuals to complete the task of picking that apple. This is UDL in action, providing choice, flexibility, and options so that each one of those individuals can meet those needs and those goals. And this is equity in education that we're talking about today. So here are the design resources that I mentioned. There's a QR code you can scan if you're using an additional device, or these links here are clickable. Sarah's also put the links in the slides. So you're encouraged to refer to these as we move through today and keep them for your future use. The first link is an interactive version of the CAST guidelines that you can use. You click on each of those checkpoints. It'll take you to another page that shows you more detail, examples, the research that supports these principles and guidelines. And then the second document, the second link, takes you to additional versions of the guidelines that have been translated into other languages, versions that are less cluttered. So they have, some of them don't have the numbers, some of them don't have all the different considerations. So they're open for you to use in whichever way you like. So bookmark these and refer to them as we move through today and as you move through your designing of courses. And so just to kind of wrap up this introduction here and give you an idea of kind of what we're going to be doing today. So your task today as we move through this workshop is to reflect on applying the Universal Design Framework to your teaching context. As we move through this workshop, we're going to be applying constructive alignment and backwards design and helping you to understand these concepts so that you can identify learning outcomes that are relevant to your teaching context, so that you can reflect on learner variability and start to anticipate some of those barriers that your learners may face so that you can identify opportunities to utilize the UDL framework and increase access and engagement. And then finally, consider assessments and instructional activities that provide flexibility and choice in how learners achieve and demonstrate the outcomes that we have provided for them. So that's UDL in a nutshell, their reintroduction and kind of a bit of a sketch as to where we're headed this afternoon. With that, I will hand it over to my colleague, Sarah.
Thanks, Mackenzie. Before I get started on constructive alignment backward design, just wanted to note if you have any questions throughout this session, please feel free to just put it in the chat. You don't have to wait until the end, and we'll try to bring it in as we're going through. We will have some time at the end for Q&A, but if something comes up, please put it in the chat and we'll come back to it. And if anything's unclear, feel free to stop us and ask for clarification. Just wanted to do a quick recap review of what constructive alignment and backward design are before we get into our UDL aspects of today. If you can go to the next slide, please. So learners build meaning from what they've already known by comparing it to new information that they receive. So we're always building on what we already know, comparing things to what we know as they're presented to us and adding to our body of knowledge. When we talk about constructive alignment, our main goal is to shift focus from the instructor's perspective of what am I going to teach to what will the students learn. So really focusing on what are the outcomes that students are going to achieve by the end of that learning experience. And instructors are going to draw connections from intended learning to their assessments and plan instructional activities. And we're trying to get rid of any irrelevant means of expression. We're trying to focus really on what is important at the core, the learning outcomes, how we're going to assess them, and how we're going to get our students there. And in the next slide, we have our sort of constructive alignment triangle. If you've been in any of our workshops where we talk about constructive alignment, we always say we have this secret handshake, which just like shows you a little triangle. See each other in the hallway, you give each other a little triangle that talks about that constructive alignment, something that we learned together. That learning out, and so at the three corners of them, we've got learning outcomes, instructional activities, assessment, and feedback methods. The learning outcomes are going to clearly state what the expected achievements are in terms of knowledge, skills, abilities, and values. The instructional activities are what we're going to do in our classes, within our lessons, within the learning experience, to provide opportunities for our learners to explore and practice those knowledge, skills, and values and goals. And then the assessment tasks allow the learners an opportunity to demonstrate and show us what they've learned and if that learning outcome has been achieved or not. But how do we achieve this alignment? One method that we really like to explore and we always focus on is the backward design. If we go to the next, slide, in the backward design, it may be referred to with different terminology as well, but just for today's purposes, we're going to stick with backward design, which is, usually when we think of a course, we're like, okay, what do we want to teach? What are the contents that I want to cover? What am I going to be teaching my students? But this backward design starts with sort of the end goal or the end outcome. So we're going to start with our outcomes to identify those desired results. What do we want our students to learn? What are the knowledge, skills, and values that we want our students to walk away with? How are we going to assess? So that assessment is the second step. How are we going to determine acceptable evidence into that learning? How will I know that that learning has taken place and my learners have achieved those learning outcomes? And step 3 is then designing learning activities and resources. So rather than saying, here's the content I want to cover, we're lastly going to think about what are the contents that will help my learners achieve those outcomes? What are the activities I can have them do? What learning experiences? How can I help them achieve those learning outcomes at the end? And the reason we wanted to talk about backward design and constructive alignment is that we feel like when it comes to designing learning experiences, UDL plays a big role in it as well. And there are two spots, especially within assessments and within learning activities and resources, where we can adapt that learner variability. We can anticipate learner variability and really think about how we can enhance our learning experiences so that all of our learners can achieve those learning outcomes. So it's moving beyond that one size fits all, but really thinking about multiple ways that our students can show their understanding of the outcomes of those skills, knowledge, and values. Same with learning activities and resources, having multiple means of engagement, having different ways that our students can engage with the content is really important in helping them achieve those outcomes. I'm briefly going to talk about learning outcomes. I'm sure you're all familiar with it, but with these workshops, we like to sort of lay the foundation or sort of the language that we'll be using for the next few hours together. On the next slide, Tobin and Belling say that without clear statements about what actions and skills earn them credits, students can get confused about what we want them to do and accomplish. And that's really why learning outcomes are really important for them to be really clear and set out from the very beginning. The way that we like to define learning outcomes and statements, it's a clear expression of what is expected for a learner to know, be able to do, or value at the end of that learning process. Now, that learning process could be a workshop, just like we started with learning outcomes today. or it could be a lesson, it could be an entire course or an entire program. Learning outcomes focus on learner performance, not instructor performance. So we're moving away from what is my goal as an instructor. We're thinking about what we want our students to achieve, what we want our learners to achieve by the end of that behavior. And therefore, it focuses on those terminal behaviors, competencies, and changes in attitude, not just the subject matter at hand. But most importantly, I always say that learning outcomes are measurable and attainable. And for us to be able to really define a learning outcome and write a statement, we want to make sure it's something that we can measure, it's actionable, and it kind of takes the guesswork out both for instructors as well as learners. If you've seen any of those sort of like those Russian dolls that sort of come, fit into one another, learning outcomes are kind of like that too. So at the very center, they could be the lesson outcomes. Those fit and map out into course learning outcomes. Course learning outcomes map up to program learning outcomes, and program learning outcomes map up to institution level outcomes. Now, I wanted to give you a chance to put this in the chat for us. What does this look like in the context of your institution? So do you have any sort of control over your lesson outcomes, your course outcomes, program outcomes, and so forth? And what is within your power to change? And maybe I'll ask you in the chat if you could put your role, if you are an instructor or a leader or a dean, if you could write your role, but also write what's within your power to change. So can you change your lesson outcomes, your course outcomes, institutional level outcomes? Be curious to know what it looks like within your institution. Okay, I see it as lecturers and senior lecturers having the flexibility to make change, especially to those lesson and course outcomes. Flexibility to update over time, which is really important because if we're trying to keep our courses, our programs on par with what our graduates need after graduation to enter the workforce, we always need to update those depending on the demands. And as we go through the session, even when we're talking more about learning outcomes, feel free to put your thoughts in the chat as well. See, instructors and lecturers, course lesson outcomes, updates are extremely important to keep students on the cutting edge of contemporary events. Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much for putting those in the chat. Lecturer, program coordinator can change learning outcomes, course outcomes, and program outcomes. So are all important. Lecturers some flexibility to change lesson and course outcomes. Program outcomes can be adjusted based on external faculty level directives or program review performed infrequently, right? So when we have those program reviews as well, that's when some of those program learning outcomes might change, and then it trickles down change into the course level and lesson levels as well. Curriculum developments, they're making changes to program and course revisions. Beautiful. Thank you so much for that. And I just wanted to demonstrate how every learning opportunity, from a lesson to course to program, they're all in alignment, and we're always trying to align our lesson outcomes with course outcomes, with program outcomes, and finally with institution level outcomes. Thanks for that. Three main benefits of learning outcomes. They improve communication in terms of the instructor's perspective to learners, expectations are clear, communication is clear, but also if you're a lecturer or an instructor co-instructing a course or having multiple sessions of the same course, it makes that communication clear among instructors too. So you might use different activities and resources in your classroom, but you're all working towards the same learning outcome. It provides structure and organization. Again, it streamlines course content. It improves assessments because it allows you to directly map your assessments to your learning outcomes, making sure that you're achieving those learning outcomes. And it enhances learning for learners. So it structures that learning and it focuses attention. And I remember in the pandemic during COVID, when we were consulting with faculty, a big panic here, at least in Canada, was, well, we've lost a lot of time now, at least in that first semester. We're moving online, we're losing a lot of time. What do we do about our lessons? And our biggest advice is always go back to the learning outcomes. What are the course learning outcomes? What can you shed that doesn't sort of add value or help your students achieve those learning outcomes? So it really focuses the attention both for learners and for instructors. And on the next slide, this is how I like to structure learning outcomes. They sort of come in two components. So we always say by the end of this learning experience, learners will be able to. We start with an action verb because we want to identify the depth of learning that's expected. A great place to look for those action verbs could be on the Bloom's taxonomy. And then we follow that action verb with the learning statement to specify what learning will be demonstrated. This is to make sure that those learning outcomes are actionable and they're measurable. And here I've included some course learning outcomes. If you do have a learning experience or a course outline with you, feel free to copy one or two of your learning outcomes into the chat as well. It's always great to see what others are working on. Some examples here, some of our action verbs are analyze, apply, design, create. So these are actionable, these are action verbs that are then followed by very specific statements. For example, analyze consumer behavior trends and propose marketing strategies, presenting findings through written reports, presentations, or digital media. Apply evidence-based approaches to patient care by interpreting case scenarios and demonstrating safe practices in simulated or real clinical settings. Design and test simple programs using at least one programming language, communicating their logic through code, pseudocode, or visual flowcharts. And then create visual designs that effectively communicate a message using traditional sketching, digital tools, or mixed media format. You'll see we've put in a little bit of a UDL spin to these learning outcomes as well, because they are showing multiple ways of engagement and assessment within those learning outcomes as well. And that's something that we hope by the end of today, or as you walk away from this workshop, you'll be able to revisit and revise with sort of with a new lens by the end of the session. I wanted to give you about 5 minutes or so to sort of set the stage for what we'll be working on today, and hopefully for you to continue working on beyond today. I want you to reflect on the following 2 questions. Record your thoughts because we're going to come back to them. Sorry, on the following questions, not the 2 questions. So I want you to think about a learning experience that you would like to apply the UDL framework to. This could be a lesson plan, a workshop, an assessment, anything that you want to work towards. So if you're an instructor, if you have an upcoming course that you want to revise, this would be a great time to pull up your course outline or lesson plan. Maybe you just want to change one assessment or one workshop. So think about that. What learning outcomes are relevant to your selected learning experience? And then identify learner variability and consider what barriers you might anticipate your learners experiencing related to those outcomes. Give you about 5 minutes or so to reflect on those. We'll keep the questions on the slides, and then we'll put you into small groups to discuss them. But for now, we'll give you about 5 minutes or so to reflect on these on your own. Hey, I hope that was enough time to get you thinking about a learning experience that you might want to revise. We're going to put you into small breakout groups. And Mackenzie, if you could go to the next slide, please. In those small groups, I would like you to take turns sharing your initial thoughts on the learning experience you want to apply the UDL framework to, the learning outcomes relevant to that learning experience, as well as learning variability that you identified and barriers that you anticipate your learners might experience related to these outcomes. I have 150 here, and we will give you until about 2:05 in your breakout groups to discuss these. And after that, we're giving you a 15-minute break. So we will come back together at 2:20 as a large group. If you finish discussing, if you need more time in your small groups, take that. If you finish earlier and want to go on a break, that's fine too. We'll meet back at 2:20. We're going to put you into those small breakout rooms. And Mackenzie, Tamara, and I are sort of going to pop into those groups as well to make sure that everyone's clear. If there are any questions that we can help out with, we'll do that as well. Let me see if I can.
I could put a mini break. I could open all breakout rooms, Sarah.
Perfect. That would be great.
Just a point to note, the presentation was shared. I don't know if somebody could reshare it for those who came in after it was shared. So you can access the same slide or take a screenshot. So when you get into the breakout rooms, you would know exactly what's to be done.
Great. Thank you, Javed.
I'm just waiting for the presentation before I open the breakout rooms.
Thanks. I think Mackenzie has it, so he'll put it back
Yeah.
in the chat. Thanks, Mackenzie.
Thanks. Okay, so it's there. Dr. Jones, please. Thanks. All right, so I'll be opening all rooms now. Have fun.
Over to you, Mackenzie.
Excellent. All right, welcome back. Just double checking that Sarah and Tamara are here as well.
Hey-ho.
Excellent, there we are. I will share my screen again. Someone can confirm that you can see the slides on the screen?
Yes.
They are there. Excellent, good. Okay.
Good. So
Looks like everyone is back, so we're ready to go. Oops.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, so I think that's it's me now, right?
It's you.
Okay, great. Thanks. And we in the group just before the break, assessment came up a lot, and I know it's always been one of the most challenging aspects of teaching. You know, as faculty, we want to get it right. We want to be conscientious. We want to be fair, and we want our assessments to reflect what students know and how they're growing in their learning. But we also want students to know themselves. And so I thought I would just ask you a couple of questions, and I will pop it into the chat. And let me just find my chat box here. There we go. Okay. So first thing that comes to mind when you hear the word assessment, and you can just enter that. I'm just going to pop the first question into the chat. And maybe you can just give a quick response. Stress. That's a really great point. Stress and anxiety. Yes, hear it a lot. Anxiety, quizzes, exams, presentations, grading, evaluation of a skill, review on learning. Excellent. All things that we associate. Cramming. That's right. And one of the keys around UDL is to try and mitigate ways where we don't have the students cramming until midnight, etc. But it's very challenging. Yeah. And so a few components of assessment, and I know that you're all SAGE faculty members and very familiar. But when we're talking about assessment, we're thinking about assessment for learning. And we're thinking about assessment of learning, measuring achievement at a certain point of time, and also assessment as learning, which engages learners in reflecting and monitoring their own progress. So on the backward design model that we were talking about earlier, well, yes, first we're going to talk about how learning works. Learners need endless feedback more than they need endless teaching. And one of the key components of assessment is thinking about the two assessment types, right? But key, how will I know if students are achieving their learning outcomes? But the other main point is, how will the learners know if they are on track and if they are achieving their learning outcomes? And I think so what I'm going to do here is, everybody was, yes, formative versus summative. Thank you. So what are the differences? So we see the chef on the left side here. And I am going to be descriptive for those of you who may be in a car or on a different device and you're not able to see the screen. So we have two images here. So on the left side, we have a chef in a kitchen, and they are stirring a very large pot of something, I think soup. And then on the right, we have an image of a customer sitting in a restaurant eating that soup. And so we can go to the next one, I think. So the main difference is, well, for formative assessment, really, it's the actions that the chef takes, tasting the soup, putting a little bit more spice into the soup, tasting it, maybe having the sous chef taste it, give feedback, etc. And then when you get to the customer and the delivery of the soup, well, that's where the high stakes come, right? The term that they say, proof is in the pudding. You get this final assessment of whether you were successful in achieving the outcome of delivering a delicious soup. And I know, Leroy, we like to talk about food at Humber. It's a very popular way to actually think about teaching and learning. So yeah, anybody have any comments in the chat around formative versus summative assessment? I don't expect any sort of one right or wrong answer. We're going to do a bit of an activity soon, and it'll take a bit of time. You prefer formative. Indira, do you want to speak to that? what is it about formative assessment that you prefer? It's feedback on practice. I like that. Continuous feedback.
Yeah, really just more of the feedback on practice. So I work with a lot of corporate clients, and I do a lot of work in culture change and in especially I was just sharing with my group in the space of psychological safety. And an important part of psychological safety is being able to create a culture of receiving feedback and also being able to give feedback. So I'm really big on, encouraging feedback, being able to deliver it, and for people also to be, understanding on the receiving end as well, why it is important. So to create that culture shift, to understand that feedback is a critical part of learning and growing.
And I love to hear that. When back in the day when I went to school, I think we had very little feedback, and sometimes the feedback was not all that useful. For example, when I was around 11, I wanted to be an artist. I loved doing art. I wasn't very skilled. But I remember, the teacher walking around the room, and they looked down at my work and they said, "Oh, you're never going to be an artist." And I was just like, oh. I was devastated, but feedback can devastate somebody. So we do need to be extremely thoughtful about feedback. And that's why we like to place a real focus on having many opportunities to provide formative assessment and feedback to your learners. I'm just going to read a couple of the things in the chat here. For a lot of you are big fans of formative feedback, formative assessment, and Brandon says, in my lower level class, we do sharing circles at the end of each session to give students an opportunity to reflect on I love that. And it also gives you an opportunity to reflect on the class and the teaching and the methods, etc. And Justin, what about weighting? Would that play a role when there is a mix of both summative and formative assessment? That way the summative assessment is not as high stakes. Well, that's definitely an approach that you can take. I have a little scenario that I encountered during the pandemic, and that was quite a challenging time for anybody in the discipline of teaching. And one of the recommendations that we were making is, because everything was online and students were getting overwhelmed, is to provide lots of mini low stakes assessments. And that's great, as long as you're thinking of it in terms of formative assessment. But what happened in the end is that we started getting a barrage, because we were, telling our faculty, you need to rethink, it's not just two big, summative at the end of each term, but to do lots of multiple mini assessments, and but with low stakes, but when those add up, right, in terms of weighting. And what we found is learners became overwhelmed, because not only are they taking your course, but they're taking 4 other courses, presumably, and they were ending up saying, I've got all of these 25 assessments a week. And caused a level of anxiety. And so when we're implementing universal design for learning, that's another key that we want to think about, is the learner and how they're feeling, and to make sure that we can alleviate anxieties when we can. So thank you for mentioning that. Yeah, absolutely. A mix of the two lends for a more holistic development. Absolutely. Thank you, Justin. So is formative assessment graded? Well, I'm going to move to the next slide. We'll talk about summative and summative and formative. You can grade formative assessments. You can add just small weighting on it. Usually when we're talking about formative assessment, we want to, maybe it's to encourage learners to actually participate in the work that we're providing for them. So giving a small grade is not verboten at all, but you also maybe don't need to. provide grades. It's more about the, the ongoing feedback that you're going in and helping your learners to understand that, whether they're on track or not. So for summative assessment types, as many of you mentioned off the top, and it's usually the first thing that people think about when they hear assessment is assignments, papers, final projects, presentations, group work, etc. And when we're talking about universal design for learning, we really want to think about how can we give learners multiple opportunities for demonstrating their learning through various forms. And some students may express themselves a little bit better in one form or another. So that's one of the keys that we need to think about when we're talking about UDL. And summative assessments, it's really, it's very important for faculty, and it's a very big sticking point. People want to make sure, they want to be conscientious that they're measuring this properly. And so who can if anybody pop into the chat a really good way to, I think, structure their summative assessment so that they can feel comfortable that they are providing the instruction that learners need. And I'll just read this one comment that I have there. Isn't giving a grade for formative assessment counterintuitive? Maybe a grade for submission, but not the content. Should students be penalized if they do not understand the content? Yeah, that's an excellent point. So it really comes down to how you're planning and delivering the assessments. I myself, I would not be inclined to, I would give, it's all about the feedback. But I do understand there are some real challenges sometimes when individuals don't complete the work. So how are you able to provide them with any feedback if they're not going to participate? So sometimes that's a bit of a motivational factor, but I totally agree with you. You allow multiple attempts for this type of assessment. I think that's great. Yeah. Allowing learners to actually, or even providing opportunities for learners to do a test assessment for exhibit. That's a bad double-barreled word, but a trial or a practice assessment. Leanna says, I saw a video of a high school teacher providing feedback to his students instantly based on their tweets that were being seen in real time via projector in class. The assignment was to tweet something based on set guidelines. It was so effective because it was not only in real time, but utilized social media. Oh, okay, that's interesting. We're able to make changes. So I love that as a medium. And it's obviously, we were talking in our group, social media is a wonderful tool to harness, as we know, meeting our learners where they're at. Are there any drawbacks maybe to, I guess, broadcasting assignments or activities that are happening in the class? There's no right or wrong answer, but you do want to make sure that you consider individuals who feel anxiety around maybe publicly posting. But I mean, I think that can be managed when you're developing your assessments. Okay, let's look at the formative assessment types. So the formative assessment is really has to do with the classroom assessment techniques that you use in class or during the teaching and learning to provide feedback. So generally, formative assessments are small scale, information gathering activities, and recognize that students do better with appropriate and focused feedback. You don't want to wait until the end of the term to find out that someone entirely missed a concept that you were teaching. It's also used by instructors to assess student progress and gather feedback on their own teaching, and used by students to monitor their own learning and provide feedback. And I think that's central, that's core to student-centered learning, is to make sure that we give learners a lot of opportunity to understand where they're at in the learning process. And I think we can go to the next one. Yeah, so some examples of CATs here. A 1-minute paper at the end of the learning experience. Well, and some of you could post in the chat, let us know like what kinds of formative assessments you may include during a course. But here are a few examples here. 1-minute paper, the muddiest point, what's still unclear or muddy in your mind after the lesson. Students respond to a prompt by sharing what content they are still not sure about. Exit passes, which is absolutely the same idea. Yeah, that's great. One thing you learned in class. And that's great feedback also for the instructor. Short quizzes are great. They can motivate learners to study harder sometimes, but no, absolutely. As a practice, Menti, yeah, the polling. So Indira, tell me about what types of things you would put into a Menti.
So it would be what was a takeaway, what is an action item that I can do. So it'd be it's a series of things, so different mentees. So a takeaway, one thing that I'm gonna practice, moving forward, coming out of this, and then what is still not so clear to me.
Yeah, and that's wonderful. And the wonderful thing about different tools that you can use, digital tools such as Menti, is that you can then retain that content and use it for your own sort of evaluation of your course materials. So I love that idea. And I love short case studies. What a great way to provide learners with a way to contextualize the content that they're learning. There's also concept maps I have here, word journals. So there are many different approaches, right? And this also gives you the ability to be somewhat creative in your teaching. Yeah, students can evaluate each other's work, but with lots of instruction around I'm a big fan of peer feedback with the proper the proper coaching around what it is to give and also to get feedback from one another, just to make sure that you don't have some random person not really understanding what the purpose of feedback is. It's wonderful. Graphic organizers, what you know, what you want to know, and what you have learned. Oh, these are all really, really great ideas. So we're going to continue with this brainstorming that we've been doing by, now this is going to take a little time. So bear with me because I'm going to explain the activity. And one thing that I'd like to do is I do want to bring the PowerPoint up again, but first I need to share my screen so that I can demonstrate to you the tool that we're going to use for this activity. So we have two options, but let me just get this. I'm not sure, it's not detecting my screen. Oh, okay. If I say, I'm just not seeing anything. Okay. Do you see my desktop too? There we go.
We're not seeing it yet.
Not seeing it yet.
Okay. Okay. Give me a second. I just had to, it was my system settings. Okay, let me do this again. So there, I think that you are going to be able to see this now. Do you see that? Nope.
Not yet.
Okay.
Ah, we're seeing it now. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Okay. I'm getting some messages from Zoom about the recording because I'm sharing a different screen. So I just want to show you this, and then we're gonna, and then Mackenzie will pop back onto the PowerPoint. So this is an environment called a Miro. Some of you, I'm sure, are familiar with this. If you're not familiar with this one, you're familiar with other whiteboard systems. So I thought we would spend a little time today to actually sort of break down and think about universal design for learning and how we select our assessments based on different contexts. So first of all, so with Miro, I am going to post a link into the chat, and you will be able to access that. And I'm going to zoom. You'll see that I have multiple groups here. So you can see that there are multiple groups, and there's a little whiteboard activity for each group. It's the same activity, but it's your own environment, so that when you go into your breakout room, you can discuss and brainstorm. And there's some opportunities here to create your own sticky notes. You can see I'm moving around the screen, so we'll give you a quick. We have a little navigation arrow here that allows you to move around. So that's how you can see your screen. You can, pinch your mouse pad in and out so that you can actually locate your group. You can also, down in the lower right-hand corner of the screen, there's a zoom out or a zoom in. So that's how we're going to navigate to the different whiteboard areas, depending on your group. And I'll just give a quick introduction to this activity. We'll get back into the PowerPoint because I also have an alternative format for you to work on in your breakout groups. And maybe that's something that you can discuss on the fly and just say, do you want to input it into a Word document? I have a Word document prepared with the same format, or you can use this whiteboard activity. Thank you for posting that, Mackenzie. Okay, because I saw people going in, so that's really good news that I'm seeing people fly around in here. And you may not have remembered what your group number is, but when you get back into your group, you will. But essentially, I've provided two scenarios here, and I thought you could choose from one or the other. Let me just zoom it in a bit. On the left-hand side, you'll see two scenarios, either case scenario 1 or case scenario 2. They're just quick little scenarios. You can come up with your own two in your group, but I wanted to provide you with, with the materials that you can, think about with a little bit of context around them, but feel free to come up with your own scenario in your group. But what I want you to do is look at the learning outcomes for those scenarios and pick one of the scenarios. And then we're going to go over here, and you can see, you can grab, whoops, sorry, I got to get out of here. You can grab sticky notes. Wait for a second. And you can move them over. And I don't want to be great to you. You don't need to fill this in great detail. I just want to get you thinking. You can add your own assessment ideas. That should say formative assessment up here. And this is summative over here on the right. So I want to give you a lot of leeway in your groups to decide which learning outcomes you want to focus on and which UDL informed principles you want to focus on. And you can actually reference the document that Mackenzie shared at the beginning of this presentation, which is the UDL guidelines. Now, one of the other things I wanted to mention about the guidelines, it can be overwhelming, right? There's a lot. And one of the key things that I wanted to mention as well around assessment, it's a lot of work. And that's why we want to get it right, and we want to do it well. And, on top of everything, we also have AI to grapple with. And there's so much pressure on faculty members, right? And how can we possibly develop and design for every single learner in our classroom? So UDL is there to help us to think about that upfront, but it is a lot of upfront work. And if you don't have that time, you need to be very discerning in what choices you make for your assessment, right? Like you can't give 10 different options for learners. This is not feasible. So a couple of considerations. One is like, do you have specific learners that you know for a fact will need some sort of an accommodation? So that's number one. You're definitely going to be needing to do that work. So you might as well design it well and then use it moving forward for others, other classes. And also, I think one of the good things about doing the heavy planning up front is that once it's done, it's available for you to use and reuse. Now, I mentioned AI for a reason because assessment is a lot of work, and AI does offer some opportunities to help develop assessments such as case studies and different ideas. It's not, the final point, but you could put in a prompt and get a pretty good assessment summary and then tweak it and design it to your needs. So I'm just offering that up there because I know that it is, it can be an awful lot of work. So I think some of you are in there and that's great. I'm going to stop sharing. If we can go back onto the PowerPoint. And I pulled the chat up here, and I just want to make sure. I can see people are in. Is anybody having an issue getting in? Please post it into the chat, and we'll try and help you get in there. Now, the second piece is I am going to add a file here, and this is a template for the group task. And I'm hoping that you'll be able to download that right from the chat. And it's essentially the same activity. So you just decide what you want to brainstorm around. Do you want to do a document, or do you want to work on the whiteboard? And so we've got a text base and we've got a whiteboard, and certainly you can just chat together and take notes. I mean, this is an open idea. Open brainstorming session, but I wanted to give you a couple of opportunities and options there. And thank you, Leroy. Did you put teaching with UDL? Is that the guidelines?
I posted the guidelines earlier. That's the slides again. We're continuously posting the slides just in case anyone who left and came back. So
thank you. I see that now, Louis. Yes, okay. So wonderful. So you can choose the Word document. Anybody having trouble, or can somebody test that the document is downloadable? And just let me know. Okay, perfect. Thank you, Mackenzie. Great. So how's everybody feeling about this brainstorming activity? Okay, great. Wonderful. And so what we're going to do is, I think what's the next, I'm going to give you 20 minutes to brainstorm. I think that'll give us enough. And then we'll come back after 20 minutes. So what time is it now? It's 2:50. So 10 after 3. And then we'll do a bit of take up. I'd like volunteer groups to share the discussions that they had around this, but I'm not going to pick on anybody, but hopefully some of you will be willing to share. And if not, I may just go into the whiteboard and read some of those out to you, some of those responses. Is everybody good with that? So we'll put you into your breakout rooms, and as long as you have that browser open, your browser open with the whiteboard, you should be able to collaborate there.
Okay, so Tamara,
yes.
If I may, we have just about 40% in this session. I'm seeing only 22 accessing Miro. So we just want to make sure before we go into the breakout rooms that you can access the Miro whiteboard. So please access it. The link is in the chat. Let me post it again.
And we could do, let's do a little check. How many, raise your hands if you, well, I guess you're going to go into your group. You might decide to do the Word document, right?
Right.
So some of you may want to do the Word document, which is absolutely fine.
Yeah.
And then Mackenzie and Sarah and I will be popping in and out of the rooms, and we'll see how it's going. So if anybody needs help or whatnot, we'll be able to help you there.
Okay, so I will be opening all rooms now.
Thank you.
Enjoy.
Javed, I'm only able to go into room 5. Is there a way that I can move between rooms?
You should be able to go. I think you've been added as co-host now, Tamara. You should be able to.
Option off the top. And you definitely do need to, if you're going to use it with your learners, just make sure that they're supported around that. But then, yeah, once you get the hang of it, and I will say that this was just one little brainstorming template. There are many templates that you can use. You know, you can have learners come together and do like a 10-minute poster, I don't know, for a class, or you know, flesh out ideas with a Venn diagram, all kinds of things. So just wanted to, it gives you some options for multiple means of expression and engagement in an online class. The other people floating around is a bit distracting. Yes. So, I mean, one of the things that you could do, I just did this giant whiteboard, and I had multiple groups. When it's just one group with like a handful of people, it's a little bit easier. But for the sake of having this large group here, I just thought it would be easier to have one that we could share back. But normally you could have your learners open their own mirror board and do that, and then they can share the content of that. You're able to actually export all of the content that goes into these sticky notes into an Excel spreadsheet, so that you then have that. Let me just share that a little bit, because I wanted to make sure that that was part of the experience for you folks here today. Okay, there we go. So just quickly, I just wanted to demonstrate for you, if you had your learners looking, working on this, you can actually export this as a PDF or as an image. If I can add a frame around it. I wouldn't do that right now, but there are multiple things that you can do with this. So wanted to share that with you. Now, we don't need to share this because you're all in there. So I just wanted to share the navigation. So I would like to do a little take up on the actual activity. But I also do want to check in. Did anybody select the Word document to work in? Oh, where's my chat?
Yes, we did. That was group 4, I believe we were called. We used the Word document to input information. Are you hearing me?
Which group?
Group
I believe
4.
that was group 4. Yes.
Group 4. Okay, great.
Yes, ma'am.
Great. So that's good. I was just curious to see who did that. And you know, the other, you can always do another one too if you could do a spreadsheet as well if you wanted to, but obviously. Hold on, checking the chat here. You use the Word document to read the task. Well, there's another one, right? Like I could have posted the Word document right into the board for people to use as well. So yeah, one group would be much easier. Yeah, thanks for that comment. So okay, so is there any rep from one of the groups that would like to share their conversation and discussion that they had around assessments and UDL principles? Show of hands. Or I can just pick a group and
So I think we can go. We were in group 2.
group 2. Okay.
Yes. So we chose scenario 2 with the nursing course on patient communication and professional practice.
Great.
We actually have a nursing lecturer in our group. So
Oh, great.
yeah, it was sort of awesome having her professional expertise. Um, but in terms of the formative assessment, we came up with a few of them. We talked about role plays or simulations to sort of demonstrate the effective patient communication strategies. We felt that sort of theatrical interplay would be perfect, right? And us Caribbean people love to have fun, love to be expressive, so we felt that that might be the perfect way of assessing that. We also looked at perhaps if it was, let's say it was a blended course or whatever, they would have the opportunity to give peer feedback on the specific role plays or simulations that were
Great.
done,
Love
so
that.
so that there could be that interplay. We also talked about there being a sort of professional journal or reflective assignment. Me personally, I believe in being a reflective practitioner. So the journals really lend themselves to issues that might come up. Say, because I think somebody had mentioned about maybe following a current nurse practitioner or a current nurse for a day just to sort of shadow them, what they do, learning from that. And then reflecting on their own communication style and identify areas for improvement. We thought that sort of that journal would lend itself to that. Things that they would have learned, things that they're willing to work better on or practice more of, that sort of thing. All right. In terms of these summative assessments, we thought that a case study would be the perfect assessment for some of the outcomes here, especially applying ethical and professional principles to patient interactions. Because if there may be so many different, and in fact, someone from our team actually gave examples of those case studies that were so relevant, right? Especially in the Caribbean context. So I thought that that was really effective. We talked about practical assessments as well. So obviously, sort of seeing how that will work in terms of the patient communication strategies, etc. And then lastly, we talked about the oral exams or presentations because we felt that this was a really great way for them to be sort of tested on the spot with the oral exams and sort of using case studies as well, right? So maybe them
Right.
getting a case study and see how they would react or conduct themselves in that specific situation. And what I particularly liked about this one is that it really built on the experience that they would have had from the role plays, right?
Right.
So that it's not
Love it.
right.
Yeah.
It reduces anxiety. It, on the spot, typically students, uh, you know, find it very difficult to come up with things on the spot, but they would have had that experience from the formative assessment stuff that were done before. So that's what we sort of came up with.
That's great. It sounds like you had a good conversation.
We did.
Brendan, thank you for sharing that.
Sure, no problem.
Any other reps from groups would like to share? Indira, did you put your hand up just now? Nope.
No,
Okay.
I was just cheering on Brendan because he's in our team.
Oh, I see. Okay.
I was trying to find some like reactions to go, yay, go Brendan. Anyway.
Anyone else want to volunteer the feedback from their group? We have a little time, not too much time, but okay. But I think you get the gist of it. And so I just wanted you to have that experience and have that collaboration around discussion and collaboration around UDL and how to think about it in terms of assessment. And I'll just get a quick show of hands, and then I'm going to pass it over to my wonderful colleague. Oh, no, we're doing another break. Yeah. We will, after a short break, I think we're going to have a shorter break. But before we do that, just overall, how did you feel generally about the overall activity and the discussions that you had around UDL?
I felt really great. And I mean, the fact that you gave a Word document as well as the Miro, so those who are having difficulty with the Miro could have used the Word, that I think was meaningful and thoughtful. And I guess in your planning tomorrow, you had to think about some of us who maybe were not too tech adept. So this is really great. This is really great.
Yeah, sure. And I will point out I was trying to also model some UDL, and there are obviously assignment choices, but also within the activity itself by giving, like, 2 case scenarios to choose from and that kind of thing. So yeah, I just wanted to do a little modeling around that. So great. Okay, I'm glad that it was engaging. And Mackenzie, I don't have another slide, do I?
Nope, that is it. So.
Okay.
Yeah, so it is 3:30 right now. We are scheduled to wrap up at 4:30. So we'll take a short break now, 10 minutes. We'll come back at 3:40. And then I'm going to enter into the final section, which is looking at planning learning activities. So we'll just cover a bit of information. We'll have another opportunity to chat one more time, and then we'll wrap up. So we'll join again and I'm going to get started right at 3:40, just so I make sure I can get you out of here at 4:30 as well as we agreed to. So we'll take a 10-minute break now, and we'll see you shortly.
Thanks, Mackenzie.
You're welcome. Thank you. Wonderful. Thank you. Well, welcome back from your break. We are on the home stretch. So we're going to kind of go through our last section here, and then we will wrap up. So again, thank you so much for your involvement and your engagement and your contributions to the chat and the discussion. So in our final section here, we're going to talk about planning learning experiences. So I love this quote. Learning is not a spectator sport. Students do not learn much just by sitting in class, listening to teachers, memorizing prepackaged assignments, and spitting out answers. They must talk about what they are learning, write about it, relate it to past experiences, apply it to their daily lives. They must make what they learn part of themselves. And I think this really speaks to UDL when we talk about engagement and access. How do we provide opportunities for students to really deeply engage with the concepts and the outcomes that we are intending for them? And so we'll come back to this UDL-informed backward design diagram again, and we're getting to our final piece down here, step number 3. So we've talked about identifying our learning outcomes. What do we want our learners to know? What skills, knowledge, values? We've talked about how will we measure their accomplishment of those learning outcomes. And so now we're going to talk about what resources and opportunities to learn learning activities will we provide to learners that will help them to meet the needs, to meet those goals and assessments. So when we talk about designing learning experiences, a UDL-informed approach to designing these experiences considers that variability. We keep coming back to that word, and it's great. As I drop into the different breakout rooms, I'm hearing people talking about that and thinking about that and considering it. And so we have to consider learner variability in 2 areas. First, when we select resources. So what resources and tools are we going to provide to learners? And also when we're planning learning activities, how will we come together in a class, either in person or virtually online, to engage in these deep learning activities, as the quote just shared with us. And so first, I'm going to talk about a UDL-informed approach to selecting resources. And again, I'm not going to spend too much time on this. I think we'll spend the rest of the session focusing on selecting learning activities. But I do want to address this and talk about, as I mentioned previously, this kind of aligns with the principle of multiple means of representation. So when we are presenting information to our learners, how are we doing it? And so the first thing we want to do is ensure that multiple means of representation. So providing resources in varied formats. So, in UDL, we talk about varied formats. I think lecture is still a valid format to share information with students, but it shouldn't be the only format. So if I am providing a lecture, I also want to provide some additional supplemental materials for learners to be able to engage with, to access that content. So I may do a lecture, and ahead of time, I may provide a selection of resources. I may provide a short article that students could read. I may also provide a short YouTube video, a TED Talk, or maybe even a podcast episode of something. So thinking about different ways that learners can engage with that information and that content. I also want to keep in mind that when I am selecting and providing those resources, that I'm supporting engagement through choice. So I want to select resources and be very thoughtful about those resources and ensure that those resources provide options and flexibility for learners to be able to customize and adapt those resources to meet their needs. So if I'm providing a video to students, I want to make sure that there's closed captioning available for them. If I am providing an article to students, I want to make sure that it's compatible with screen readers, or that there's an audio version of that as well. When I select textbooks now, I always make sure that there is an audio version of the textbook, and I always go and test it and try it out myself before I use it. I learned that lesson a hard way. I started using a textbook a number of years ago that had an audio version as well, and I thought, oh, this is great. It'd be great for my students to be able to listen to it while they're commuting, or while they're making dinner for their family, or doing something else. And then I selfishly thought, I can listen to those chapters as I'm driving to work, preparing for my course that day. So I got into the car, started playing the textbook, and I realized that very quickly it was not accessible. This audio version of the textbook not only read out the text, but it read out any hyperlink that might have been included in that text as well. So it would read a passage of text, and then it would say parentheses, HTTPS : / and it would read out the entire URL, which I found very distracting and difficult. So I always make a point now of, if I am using a resource that has additional versions or accessibility tools in it, that I take a moment to check those out as well. Ensure that the resources you're selecting are relevant and authentic. Pick resources that connect to learners' experiences and course outcomes. There's a great concept that's talked about in UDL as well. Some of you may be familiar with this, the idea of, as educators, providing mirrors and windows for our learners. So mirrors are an opportunity for learners to see themselves reflected in course content. When they're learning about these things, do they see their identities, their culture, their thoughts and values in that content? So that's looking in a mirror. And then there's also the idea of providing windows for students. Do these resources provide a variety of different perspectives, also associated with identity, culture, values, and those things? So making sure that students can see themselves in the resources, but also that they have an opportunity to learn about others as well. And then finally, when we're selecting resources to share with our students regarding learning, it's always important to anticipate learner variability. So select resources with flexible difficulty levels or scaffolding options. Often when we think about learner variability and barriers to learners, we often think about the students who are maybe struggling or having a difficult time with the content. And we forget to think about those students that are excelling. And sometimes those students that are excelling become disengaged because there is not enough of a challenge for them. So this is often something to keep in mind as well, providing additional or supplemental resources for those students that are really eager or really interested or passionate about a topic. I often, when I provide assessments or assignments to students that have resources attached, I provide choice. So they can choose to read an article, listen to a podcast, watch a video, interview someone, whatever their choice is to access that content. And I often have learners who will do multiple of those. They'll say, I listened to the podcast and then I was so interested that I went out and interviewed somebody as well. So we have to think about not just providing flexible options for students who are maybe struggling, but also thinking about how do we provide an optional, more challenging level to access this content for those students who want to know more and dig deeper into these ideas. So those are just some ideas to keep in mind as we approach selecting resources that we're going to be sharing with our learners. So now we'll shift gears and we'll talk about moving away from those resources to actually those learning activities. How are we engaging learners in the content and to help them to understand, develop skills and values and meet those learning outcomes? So we want to find opportunities for what we refer to as active learning activities. And Tamara already talked about some of these when she addressed the idea of formative assessments. And so active learning activities can be also used as a formative assessment for learners to try something out, to gather some feedback from that and incorporate that into their learning. So we always want to make sure that when we are using these learning activities that we've made clear connections to lessons, courses, and lesson or course learning outcomes. I always provide a rationale for why we are engaging in a specific learning activity. And I try to connect that rationale back to those learning outcomes. We are engaging in this activity to meet the learning outcome of, and I try to make that as implicit as possible, as explicit as possible for my learners. One thing that I've really appreciated since I've been on my UDL journey is the idea of sharing intention. So being very open with my learners about why I'm choosing something. And after that, I also encourage feedback. So if I can explain to them the goal or the intention or why we're doing this, that also makes it clear to them afterwards if it worked for them or not. And then I can gather some feedback. Did this work? What worked? What didn't work? It allows me to iterate my teaching practice as I go. And it allows the learners, again, to develop some agency in saying, this worked for me, or next time I would prefer if we could try this. And you can see we've modeled a bit of that tomorrow after that last exercise. Asked what worked, what didn't, and we took some feedback from that. We want to recognize that motivation and willingness to engage might differ between learners. And that could be related to a number of factors. In the previous activity, Tamara also provided some choice of a Word document, which was less tech heavy than using the mural board. So someone who maybe isn't as comfortable with technology and the mural board was the only option might have kind of pulled away and been disengaged. But because we had that alternative option, it allowed them to make that choice. Again, offering choice and flexibility, varying the level of challenge, as I talked about on the previous slide. I heard some feedback already from that previous exercise about the idea of developing community and collaboration, how it was a positive aspect to be able to talk to your colleagues. Reflecting on my teaching practice, at times it can feel like a very solo endeavor. We can feel very kind of siloed, right? You have your courses and your classes and you teach those classes, you're engaging with your learners quite frequently, but you don't always, and I find this has even increased since the pandemic, and we've moved to more kind of online and flexible means of delivery and meeting, is that we don't always get the opportunity to meet with our colleagues and talk about these things related to teaching and learning. So thinking about that from your students' perspective as well. What opportunities are we providing them to hear from their peers and colleagues, to talk to them, to engage in these types of discussion? As you can see, we demonstrated use of technology to support engagement, finding different ways, but also, as we just reflected on, also providing some low-tech options as well for people. And then always really important to debrief and provide feedback, as I mentioned. Anytime I engage in a learning activity, as I said, I make it very clear to the learners what my intention was for this, and then I provide an opportunity for them to give some feedback. What worked? What would they need next time? And to demonstrate what they learned. So in terms of active learning, what is it? Active learning is anything course related that all students are called upon to do other than simply watching, listening, and taking notes. So how are we deeply engaging? And as the previous quote at the beginning of this section said, how are we helping them to incorporate this learning into themselves and becoming a part of them? And so on the screen here, I have a list of some potential active learning techniques. Some of these may seem familiar to you. We've talked about some already. Some people have entered some of these into the chat. So I'm not going to give you too much detail because we're going to do another activity related to this, but I'll just read through them. So think, pair, share, a concept map, using case studies. We've heard some discussion around that. Debates, exit tickets or muddiest point, doing a gallery walk, a jigsaw, an application card, a minute paper. I always have to slow down for this next one to pronounce it properly. Questions. All right, we'll find out what that is shortly. Snowball or tell me what you have heard about. So those are just a few examples, and we're going to get an opportunity in a few minutes to explore those a little bit deeper, have some conversation related to those, and then share back. But if anybody has any other active learning strategies that they use in their teaching context, feel free to share them in the chat as we go. So why? Why do we use these active learning approaches or techniques? What are the benefits of them? So learners are more likely to retain content and skills. Just, a passive absorption of information through lecture, video things, again, it doesn't provide that depth of engagement with that. But when we provide opportunities for students to deeply engage and share and connect those learning experiences to their own experiences, they are going to be more likely to kind of retain that content long term. It really goes a long way to building classroom community. As I mentioned, we don't often get an opportunity to sit and do that. If you think about traditional education lecture style, it was you showed up, you listened, and then you moved on to your next course, things like that. These learning activities allow for frequent and immediate feedback. Again, going back to Tamara's section around formative feedback. These learning activities provide an opportunity for lots of feedback, and not just feedback from us as educators, but it provides an opportunity for students to do some self-assessment. So often when I do these activities, I'll provide a rubric for students that they can self-assess their own understanding and knowledge and skills based on that. Tamara talked as well about some peer feedback as well. So finding ways for students to, obviously not for grades, as that can bring up some challenges, but providing opportunities for learners to hear from their peers and their colleagues. It goes a long way to connecting content to their own personal experiences, increasing relevance and motivation and engagement. It can increase self-confidence and self-reliance. One conversation that I did have with one of those groups is we have to be really careful. Sometimes when we offer choice and flexibility, students might meet that with some apprehension, some fear, or some anxiety. So for example, I do a lot of reflection assignments in my course where students have to reflect on an experience or what they're taking away from a learning experience. And I provide the flexibility of submitting that as a written assignment, as a video assignment, as an auditory assignment, or some sort of visual they create. But what I noticed when I first started utilizing UDL, and I would provide all these great options, is that students just kept doing the same thing. They kept doing the writing. And when I asked for some feedback about why, the student said, well, I've never done that before. What happens if I try it and I get a bad grade? And so these active learning activities can be a great low stakes or no stakes way for learners to practice these skills. So I may say as an activity, get together and make a video about this, and then you're going to share it with the class. Is it graded? No, it's not graded. Go have some fun, try it out. They get an opportunity to try it, play around, see how it works. Then if I offer that as a graded assessment later on or higher stakes, they may be more apt to select that because they've had an opportunity to try it out. It can improve communication, overall performance. Students tend to have a more positive attitude toward courses when they are engaged. And then ultimately this idea of kind of collaboration, working together. So those are some of the benefits of why we want to use this approach. So when it comes to implementing these activities, some things to keep in mind. We always want to focus on outcomes. So make sure that the activities align with those learning goals. Again, I keep saying it, intention is so important. Making that intention very clear to the learners. This is why we're doing this. This is what my hope and my expectation of what you'll get out of it is. Building community. So what I wouldn't do is go in on the first day of a class and make students take some risks and be vulnerable, maybe sharing in front of the group or something. So I may have to, use some other activities first to kind of build that trust, to build that comfort and community first before I put people in a position where they maybe have to be vulnerable or share or do something that they're maybe not comfortable with. Always start small. As I said, introduce simple tasks with clear guidance. Opportunity for feedback. And again, remember, when I say feedback, it doesn't just mean from us as the instructor or the educator. Students can do self-assessment. Students can do peer assessment, group feedback, things like that. There's lots of opportunities for students to get feedback along the way in these formative and active learning activities that doesn't have to rely on us. Vary the methods, use diverse strategies and tools. So I don't always use the same approach. I vary it up, different things, different times, or providing choice as we did in the last activity. You can do this or you can do this. And then always check for understanding and adjust based on feedback. As I said, when I'm finished a learning activity, I always get some feedback from those students about, did this work, did it not work, what could I do different next time? And that helps me to kind of iterate and build on my teaching practice. So I went through that real quick, but we're going to get back to some more conversation. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go back to our breakout groups one last time and spend a few minutes. I said 15 minutes. We can probably do 10 for this activity. So what we're going to do is I'm going to post in just a moment. I'm going to post a document in the chat. And that document has a list of 12 active learning strategies or activities that can be used, and a short description for each. Oh, look at that. They're posted right there. Thank you, Sarah. I will post the document because it does have a detailed description for each of those. That's just a very brief description. So what you're going to do is based on your group number. So if you're in group 1, you'll look at think, pair, share. If you're in group 2, so when you go to your group, your breakout room, you'll see a number. So you'll select the active learning strategy related to your group. And then you'll just have some short discussion around how does this active learning strategy align with UDL? So thinking about those 3 principles of multiple means of engagement, multiple means of representation, multiple means of action and expression. And then also thinking about trying to predict what might be some of the what barriers might learners experience in this activity. So again, we have to be careful if we don't just select one activity and say, great, we're doing this now. We may be leaving out some learners. So starting to think proactively about, if I do this in class, what will I also need to include to ensure that there's access and engagement for everyone? And then I'm going to pose a challenge to you, because we're going to come back and we may not have time for everybody, but we'll do a few of these 1-minute summaries. So we'll pick a couple groups who are comfortable to share. And in 1 minute, you'll quickly summarize what is the strategy, how did you feel it connects with UDL, and what might be a potential barrier. Again, thinking of barriers, time limit isn't always the best for everybody. When I do these sort of time limit type things, I don't do them individually. I always provide it to a group. And so the group can kind of come together and say, how can we do this concisely? But I am a big proponent of putting some of these in sometimes, because students do need to learn how to be concise sometimes as well, if that's a goal or an outcome we're looking at. So I'm going to post that document in the chat now, and then we will jump into our breakout groups. Okay, so again, based on you'll say a group and a number. Once you're joining your group, you'll pick the active learning strategy associated to that. You can briefly read the description and then have some short discussion. So we'll take about 10 minutes. It's 4 o'clock right now. We'll come back at 4:10 to the large group. We'll do a little debrief, and then we'll prepare to wrap up for the day. Okay. Excellent. Thank you, Javid. All right, thank you. Welcome back one last time. We were able to pop into the groups, some great discussion happening there. So for the sake of time, we won't probably go through every single one of these active learning strategies, but I did provide the document, so you do have a list of it. But if anyone wanted to share, maybe a couple groups that wanted to, and again, I'm gonna give you the challenge of trying to keep it to a 1-minute summary. So if anyone groups wanted to share the active learning strategy that they had, and maybe one idea of how it connects to UDL, and maybe identifying one barrier related to that. Is there any groups that wanted to?
Some groups actually just closed.
Oh, sorry, they just got back. Sorry, I'm a little too quick. So welcome back. I'll say that again. Welcome back. If we're going to just kind of do a brief take up here. So I don't think we have time to go through every one of the active learning strategies, but you do have that document that lists them. So you're welcome to kind of take a look at that and continue these in your discussions as groups moving forward. But if there's 1 or 2 groups that wanted to maybe share, and I'm going to hold you to give you the challenge of trying to keep it to a 1-minute summary of what was the active learning strategy that your group talked about. Oh, I see one in the chat. Excellent. So group 10 had the jigsaw. So UDL alignment, it offers UDL multiple means of engagement and expression. Students can work in small groups. based on their strengths, excellent. They can teach peers, wonderful, and interact in different ways, speaking, summarizing, visual aids, excellent. It's got collaboration and critical thinking, perspective taking, flexibility, wonderful. A potential barrier. Some students may feel anxious presenting to peers, excellent. That's a very valid challenge or concern for many learners. So in order to mitigate that barrier, allow small group practice, visual aids, or co-presenting to reduce pressure. Excellent, wonderful. So a very relevant barrier and already some great ways to kind of work around and proactively plan that. Oh yeah, and so that was Linus, Aisha, and Denisa. Thank you very much. Is there another group that wanted to share the active learning strategy that they looked at? You can raise your hand and share verbally. You can add to the chat.
We also did the jigsaw.
Okay.
It was similar to peer and share. One of the barriers along the lines of this, not only presenting. So I would ask them to, I've used it before, something like that before. And I ask the students to present and on a topic. And sometimes they might just go straight to the textbook instead of, relating what they actually understand. And then other students may not feel comfortable asking them direct questions or putting them on the spot. So to kind of, give them some motivation for that, I would give them a question to do afterwards so that they know, hey, we really have to understand what this is. And so whatever barrier they have, with shyness or whatever it was, asking the others, putting them on the spot or whatever, they would feel, hey, it's worth it because I need to answer this question and we all in this together. So that's how
so providing those, wonderful. Yeah, so providing those prompts ahead of time then scaffolded. So for some learners, you may give them these activities and they just run with it, but some might need a little more support or scaffolded support. So I often provide sample prompts for if I'm providing a reflection activity, I may say, these are some prompts that you can use to start your reflection. Some students will use them, some won't. Claudette, you have your hand up. Did you want to share?
Yes, our group is group 9, and we did the minute paper, which was very straightforward, whereby the student took away the key point from the main points from the lecture and be able to write that minute paper. However, it calls for active listening as well as engagement of the student, and it's a form of action and expression as it relates to the UDL. Additionally, we did discuss though, although that assignment would be quite straightforward, you do have some barriers depending on the topic that is being taught within the classroom. For example, I taught of poverty. If that is being taught at the poverty level, as I teach community nutrition, or persons may be experiencing poverty, the barriers could be socioeconomic. Some students may not want to write about that. Or if we deal with the migrant crisis, whereby some students may be, let's say, for example, they may be associated with that particular, the migration and so forth. It depends if the student would like to write about that. So although it's anonymous, it's putting down that particular thoughts on paper, etc. But it was quite an interesting assignment.
Yeah, Claudette, it's an excellent point that you bring up, is that there may be aspects of a person's personal experiences, life experiences, identities that, bring up some anxieties or some fear or some avoidance related to certain topics. And, that's something that I struggled with for a while, and until I had a similar situation where I may have shared this in the other session that we had. I teach disability studies. And so I had a module coming up related to fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. And I had a student who approached me and said, I really, really want to learn about this. Not only do I want to, but I need to learn about this because they had a family member who was affected by prenatal exposure to alcohol. And they said, I really need to learn this and want to learn this so that I can support my family member, but I feel I'm not going to be able to do this in a room full of other people. It's going to be too difficult and too emotional for me. So really important to keep in mind, as you said, Claudette, is how might this be connecting to someone's experience, and how can we provide a bit of choice or flexibility or safety in providing, especially around some of these really difficult topics that may be very close to home for some of our learners. So thank you for sharing that. That's a really important
You're quite
point.
welcome. And the team members, we had Junette Mohan as well as Christine Lyons.
Excellent. Wonderful. Thank you, everyone. So I think we've gone through a couple of those. You get the idea, but again, I think it's great. I hear the discussion and I can already hear you thinking about ways that you can adapt and use these, but also really focusing and thinking about, who are the learners in my room? How are they different? And how do I proactively think about barriers and try to meet everyone's needs in this learning environment? So excellent, thank you. So that brings us to kind of wrapping up. So to wrap up, I want to leave a bit of time if there's questions. So to wrap up, I just want to kind of go through and take us on a bit of a journey where we came from and where we started. So we started introducing or reintroducing the UDL guidelines and the graphic organizer, talking about those 3 principles of multiple means of engagement, multiple means of representation, multiple means of action expression, and how we can use this framework to design curriculum and learning experiences that are accessible to a wide range of diverse learners and engaging for those learners. We talked about how the outcome of implementing this choice and flexibility in curriculum leads to equity in education, right? Providing students option and choice and resources to help support them along their educational journey will result in hopefully retention, them sticking out even when things get difficult and challenged, persevering through those things, and ultimately meeting those goals. We talked about and reintroduced for maybe many of you the concept of constructive alignment. So really putting that thought into, do my learning outcomes match my assessment? Does my assessment match the instructional activities that I'm using? And all in that triangle. Any one of those points, can we connect those two? And is there a clear connection between those? And then we talked about that process of backward design. So combining this constructive alignment and UDL with this backward design process. So starting with those learning outcomes. What do I really want my students to be able to demonstrate, to know, to understand, to value when they leave this learning experience? Starting there really helps us to focus and helps our learners to focus on what the expectations are. It gives clear guidelines. Then we can start to say, great, I know what I want them to demonstrate. How are they going to demonstrate that? And then thinking about where there may be some barriers related to that, adding some choice and flexibility. And then finally, as we just wrapped up talking about, once we know what we want them to learn and how they're going to demonstrate that to us, what learning experiences and resources do we provide that are going to help them along that journey? And again, thinking about barriers and that learner variability, as well as that learner agency. Providing choice and flexibility helps learners to learn how to learn. We did have a great discussion in one of the groups. I can't remember which group it was at the moment now, but we talked about this idea of lifelong learning and how, most of our students and learners, when they finish our programs and go off into a career, gone are the days of finishing school, getting a job and working at that job for 50 years, right? Most of our learners will switch between different roles, different jobs, even if they progress in those roles, and that is going to require lifelong learning. And so if we can use this UDL framework and this UDL approach to support our learners to understand how they learn best, to understand and develop that learner agency, that'll go a long way in not just them being successful in our course and our programs, but hopefully them being successful in life and their careers. And if you are all probably like me, you are teaching and you are here because you are passionate about the field or the discipline that you are teaching in. And we are here to develop and support people to become good professionals in those fields. And I think UDL provides a great framework and a method for us to do that. So as we wrap up, I just want you to think about, through the discussions and the activities today, how will you start to apply the UDL framework in your teaching context? Or many of you may already be applying this. This is another comment I heard in some of the groups, is people saying, oh, I'm already doing this. And so maybe not even recognizing that you're doing many of these things already, but now you can do it with more intention. Now you can share with your learners, this is what I'm doing and this is why. Again, it's co-creating that learning experience, getting feedback from them, and continuing to evolve your teaching practice to benefit your learners. So with that, thank you very much for your time, for your engagement, for the great discussion and sharing. We do have a few minutes left over, so if anyone would like to have some, ask some questions, share some examples, or have a discussion, we've got a few minutes left. Got some comments in the chat, so leave, but yeah, so lots of thank yous. Thank you.
Yeah.
Wonderful. got 8 minutes. I can talk for 8 minutes more, or we can respect your time. And if anyone wants to stick around, then by all means, thank you very much. But and again, as I said at the beginning of this presentation, you know, this was hopefully not the end of our collaborations. I
No,
think
it's not.
We've got
It's
lots of
not.
more opportunities to continue to kind of work together and share. And I think Sarah and Tamara can attest to this as well. Every time that we facilitate a session like this, I can speak for myself. I leave with some new ideas as well. I always learn from this as well, and it's an opportunity for all. So thank you for sharing.
I have a suggestion for the next session, because we challenging usually with shortage of stuff and also resources and capacities. So although we would like to do all these, and it sounds very great to have many multiple access material for students, we can sometimes not produce. So it would be very helpful if we would think, how can we use AI, other tools to create faster and more efficient inclusive learning materials. So this is something, going home with all this information, very inspired, but in the end we struggle of not implementing it, or having challenges to implementing it, and you investigating and how can we create feasible solutions for lecturers, and that is a really I think an important barrier to change our way of teaching and get stick to what we have, or
That's
might
wonderful.
not implementing it as we wish to implement.
Yes, no, excellent comment and observation. And a couple points. So I've done some work. I did a session around UDL being an efficiency strategy as well. So how do we use UDL as an efficiency strategy in our teaching process? But I will also, and Dr. Hill, this is a bit of a recruitment for your upcoming lecture series, is that you're going to get to hear from Tom Tobin. And Tom Tobin is the co-author with Kristen Belling of a wonderful book called Reach Everyone, Teach Everyone. And one of the biggest learnings that I've taken out of that book is what they refer to as the +1 approach. So how do we do this efficiently? And Tom Tobin talks about, you know, just thinking about one thing that you can add each time you go through a course or an assessment or a learning activity, reflecting on those potential barriers, getting feedback from learners, and then just adding one thing.
Yeah.
So I told you I could talk for 8 minutes. My initial foray into UDL came as a pilot project at Humber, where we had a pilot project of redesigning an entire course through the UDL lens. And I learned from that is a monumentous task and probably not the best way to approach it. And that really helped me to appreciate the +1 approach. And it also benefits you in the iteration process of, if you try one thing, you can assess the effectiveness of that. If you change everything at once, it can be difficult to determine what worked and what didn't work. It's a scientific method, if we think about it, right? Reduce as many variables as possible and kind of test that hypothesis. So that +1 approach you'll probably hear from Tom Tobin at that lecture as well. So thank you.
Yeah, man, this was really exciting, really great. I want to thank you, Mackenzie, Tamara, Sarah. Thank you for taking the time out. I mean, this is really phenomenal. I'm excited. I don't know what the next step would be. I mean, and as you ended with that, Mackenzie, I would perhaps challenge any one of us. Don't think of the entire elephant. Just one bite at a time. Choose one area and focus on that, and then you can see the rewards of you deepening your commitment to being more inclusive, and addressing that one step at a time, because we do know and Julia mentioned it in terms of the many things, the workload, and that's a reality. I mean, and I think, Julia, you gave the idea of perhaps the intersectionality between UDL and AI. That is something to explore, and we have that on our radar. We have that. In fact, the 2020 2025, 2026 calendar is our calendar is published today, and that is our focus, focusing on using inclusive but AI inclusive practices. That's our focus. Last year was our inclusive cultural responsive teaching focus, and 2026 we're focusing on AI and how AI can be intersection in so many different ways: assessment, course design, planning. And so, Julia, that is certainly part of the plan, and I'm really excited. I'll give you a little clue. Now, we know that some of you have to go, but from this, we really want to get the commitment of persons who really want to get the intensive support, as Julia, as you mentioned, and we do have a MOU with Humber that we intend to continue, and we intend to activate through the various different activities. So that would involve us in integrating, interfacing with more intense UDL training, which is more hands-on and more individual. It won't be large as this, but certainly when we send a call out, we from this call, we're going to send a call from this. We're not going to send a call from those who would not have completed the sessions. So we do intend to provide additional support and capacity building for those who would have completed this workshop. And I want to say thank you. I want to say thank you. I learned a lot as well. Every time you learn something new. And so this is certainly an opportunity to do that. Yes, tomorrow we need to find a way. I'm going to have to stop the recording and then we'll decide.
I'm hoping that AI will come up with a way to do teleporting.
No, but outside the teleporting, I think we can make it happen. I think we certainly can make it happen at the next phase. And so I look forward to that. I know great things are ahead. And I'm really, really grateful for the networking and the opportunities for us to engage and collaborate and give back to Humber as well. So we want to find ways to give back to Humber. So perhaps that can be a way of us ensuring that we can ensure you know, find a physical workshop, because I know some of you would have preferred the in-person workshop, right? So yes.
I would like to give some feedback that I know that Mackenzie and Sarah and I have talked about this before, because we did another session. I think, Sarah, you did an earlier one, and it's such an engaged group, and it's a real pleasure to dialogue with all of you and share ideas.
Thank you.
And
I
yes,
don't know if anyone
I was just going to echo that you've got a devoted group of educators here. It's very clear.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, wonderful.
All right, guys, I'm going to stop the recording.